Okay. There we are. All right. So thank you everyone for joining. Good evening. Just a quick introduction. I know a lot of you know who we are, but just for people who don't, my name is Judy Kitt. I'm the president of the Foundation for Mind Being Research, FMBR, which was founded in 1980 by scientists and healers and artists who were interested in the nature of human consciousness. And so over the course of the last 43 years, we've been exploring that, that kind of bridge between science and consciousness and altered states. And we've just had really wonderful people to present. And in 2020, like everyone else, we went from being live in-person events to YouTube, which has helped us really reach a much larger audience. And we're grateful that you're here, to the people on YouTube and the people on Zoom. If you're here on Zoom and you want to ask a question, you can type it in the chat, you can type it in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand if you want to ask Nanci directly. And if you're on the YouTube channel, you can just type a question in and someone will text it to me, and we'll be able to take questions at the end, if that's okay with you, Nanci. So Nanci is a friend of FMBR, and I have lost my introduction. Oh, my computer's doing really weird things today, I think, because of the storm. Okay, so now I can introduce you, Nanci. Nanci Trivalleto has a master's in research methods in psychology. She's a founding member of the International Academy of Consciousness and the Institute of Applied Consciousness Technologies. She has been dedicated to consciousness science since 1990 and has lectured around the world on 5 continents and in over a dozen countries. She established a Journal of Consciousness, of which she was the chief editor for 15 years, and she's the author of the book Vibrational State and Energy Resonance. She's conducted studies on out-of-body experiences, and her current research project is on children's non-ordinary experiences. And so Nanci, I want to welcome you and thank you. You're a longtime friend of FMBR. I was looking at, when you were here last, I think it was 2018, pre-pandemic.
Possibly, yes, long time. Yes, hello to everyone who is there already. Thank you, Judy, for the nice introduction.
Yeah, so you can, you're going to speak to us about out-of-body experiences, and we had PMH Atwater talking about out-of-body experiences in children, and she talked about how a large number of them come back with the experience of synesthesia. And then we had a presenter talk about synesthesia. This is really just a wonderful topic, the out-of-body experience, and I love that we're talking more about it, because I think as we evolve our consciousness, this will become more, what I want to say, normal, or at least more talked about.
More current, perhaps. Yes.
Exactly. So, thank you for being here.
It's going to be a very nice talk. I'm very glad to be here talking about this. I study a number of phenomena, but indeed, I think the out-of-body experience is such a key phenomenon. And I have prepared some slides to share with all of you, just to organize a bit more of the talk. And I have shared a bit of this on a TEDx talk, but it's so limited and in a way censored. I want to share with you what I could not share there and go deeper into this conversation here. And if it's okay with all of you, I would like also at the end to mention how the out-of-body experience happens, a bit of the mechanism, because one of the things that I feel is that we hear stories, we have interesting reports, we have some research, but we do not seem to go further into understanding the phenomenon. We just, I feel, we accumulate more and more information, more and more cases. But if we do not analyze the cases to get to some sort of conclusion, even if it's a preliminary conclusion, a hypothesis, then I think it's harder for us to progress and to bring this, as Judy said, to a phenomenon that is normal. People understand it. Not everyone will have it, but people will understand it. And it can make such an impact in our lives. I'm just going to be opening here my presentation. Let me put this in presentation mode. To give me just a moment, please. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me see how I can put this in a more decent presentation mode. Sometimes when I am sharing, I think I will see if you raise your hands. Okay. Because the subject that I love exploring, it's not only the phenomenon of out-of-body experience, but how it happens, understanding the backstage of it, but also what sort of impact it has in our society. And my TEDx talk was supposed to be how out-of-body experiences can transform yourself, science, and society. I had to remove science from the title, funny enough, because it was not possible for them to accept that anyone would talk about science if we are considering a reality that is beyond just the ordinary physical world. So at last minute, I had to adapt. And still, my TEDx talk, if you take a look, is kind of censored. They put there a note, we do not agree, or something like this. So, but it's okay. I think we are progressing. I have been on the road for 33 years, studying, researching, lecturing, participating in different conferences and media shows, TV shows all over the world. And what I see is that nowadays, the world is so much more open to talk about this, but not necessarily much more respectful. I'm not sure that's the word I want to bring here, but not so much more understanding of what is behind. And I blame, if I can use this word blame here, I blame us, I mean those who study the phenomenon, because it is so spread, so many people talking about out-of-body experience, healing, sensing chakras, and what exists in the non-physical world, and channeling. And there are loads of people that abuse the lack of information that we have in regards to this, the lack of serious information. So my goal, my purpose in life is to bring information that is substantiated, not only for people to understand the phenomenon, but for them to be able to judge by themselves, to analyze and come to a conclusion as far as what is a substantiated, serious information and what is not. That is a very dangerous, risky area of study. I have a video that I have published that I called How to Recognize a Code, because we have too many disguised in so many different ways. So it's not just saying this is a science that makes this a science. And all of you there, I'm sure can appreciate what I'm saying. And we have to have some standards, not so much of the research methods, but how we approach the events that we observe. So if it's okay with all of you, I'll go along these lines and then comment some of the practical uses of the out-of-body experience, tell some of my own experiences, and discuss how you can sense it, what would be the evidences for you of the differences, let's say, of a dream, a regular dream, and an out-of-body experience. These are all within the area that I believe needs a lot of study and to be more understood. So here, going back to my slides. So this is the presentation that I gave. If you want to see the summary there, you have it available. And I think we are discussing here about perspectives of reality. And we are in a society that sometimes everyone is so certain of things, but at the same time, nobody really knows what is this reality. Is this a simulation? Is this everything virtual? Is this only in our mind? Do we have parallel worlds? And the theories grow and grow. And of course, we can create all sorts of models. What I like doing and what I resort the most to is to establish models and theory based on accounts, on what can be observed through actual experiences. And of course, we have to create a framework to support all of these theories. And that's what I'm going to present here to you today. But when we think of perspectives of life, and sharing with you a little bit of my perspective and how things grew for me, I have had some experience since I was very young. And I did not know what they were. They were okay experience. Nowadays, I am studying about children's psychic experience to support those who need to understand more or need to understand their kids. There is so much information that is not completely understood in regards to this. And perhaps one day, Judy, I can share some of these research data. I think that it's of interest of many, especially those who had been sensitive or have kids around, grandkids. And at the time, I see now that for me, those experiences were just something that I had to explain in my mind. And perhaps I shared these with some of you in the sense that you may also have had experience during childhood that not necessarily they were the absolute norm. And so many kids just forget about this. I did not. And why is it that I did not forget and some do? Because some of my experiences, they were a little traumatic. I say a little because I know of people who had been super scared. But there was a period in my life in which I moved houses from one city to another, and then being in different houses. I always have been sensitive and I always have had out-of-body experience. I'm going to share with you my first experience, which I had some evidences to confirm it. But there was a period in one specific house that I lived in which I would feel so many bad things around, entities. And I would wake up in the middle of, and that was not for me normal. Huh? It was not like, oh, this girl has always been traumatized. No, it was not the case. And then I would hear things and see and wake up with strange nightmares and feel there was someone close by or watching me. And it was not a matter of fact that, oh, she sleeps alone. She wants to be with the parents. Not true. I slept at the time with 3 other sisters in the same bedroom. So I had plenty of company, but still I would sense things that they would not. And some phenomena were super strange. And I study and analyze some of them to understand the backstage. But my point is, so many of us have had some experience, some out-of-body experience, a dream of flying, or they saw the ceiling of their house when they were kids. And of course, that's a perspective we are not supposed to have because we are not flying. And then only later on they start connecting. But most individuals and children at the time end up forgetting for many different mechanisms, just passed by, was not so impactful, they did not understand, and there are things that we forget. So how can we make sense and understand all of that? The reason I'm bringing this is because I think the out-of-body experience is key and can help us understand, and you will see throughout my development here why. And then when I talk about perspectives on reality, someone who have had an experience such as these that I have had, cannot just think life is only material. It's impossible. But it's not true that this is a sense that I have only because of my experiences. because I have been in some TV shows, for example, with live audience, in which some of the audience there would share with me their experiences. And I would say, wow, amazing, that is a super confirmation, such an interesting case. But for them, they would say, well, it was a messenger of God, period, it was the Bible. So I'm not discussing Bible or not, religion or not. I think these are two separate things. One thing is our set of beliefs, what the world is, and what is the framework, the structure, or how this world started. And another completely different thing is how we examine the actual experiences that we have. And I think they have to be separate. Otherwise, we have a mixing of religion and science at the same time. But some of those at the audience would tell me that. So perspectives of reality, because if we are not open-minded enough, nothing changes. Some of the perceptions that we have, like non-ordinary perceptions, we can have in the waking life, not necessarily while our brain is asleep. But some of the perceptions we have, they will be confirmed or better understood through the out-of-body experience. And as I mentioned to you, that's why I'm studying some of these events that happen to kids for a very specific reason. Number one, kids need help. When we are experiencing any of these, we would like to be able to share, but we do not know how to verbalize. Not even an adult sometimes know how to verbalize. What are you going to expect from a kid? For me, it was hard to say, I know there's something there that's not there. I just couldn't put the words together. But my point here is that we can help these kids, but we can also help the adults who have had this sort of experience. And I think that is a great step. Now, when we talk of perspective, this is something that I showed in my TEDx talk, and I'm only going to show here briefly. It's not a point for the discussion here. But we are so certain of reality, and we see here an image of the skies, of the cosmos. And when they are captured with different cameras that use different wavelengths, so you see, this is the same sky, same area. So how can we compare this that I showed you before with this and say this is the same reality? Physical reality. I'm not talking about spiritual, energetic. I'm talking about something physical. And this is the same as well. And this is the same as well. So to what extent could we assume that ourselves, our perceptions, and Judy was talking about the synesthesia, right? To what extent could we assume or consider that maybe each of us, we are picking a different frequency? This is not a proper word. This is a word we use here for the physical world, but the only one we have, the one that gets closer. So to what extent we can capture different frequencies of reality? Nonetheless, this cannot be completely subjective. Tell me if you agree with this idea. It cannot be completely subjective. Why not? I'll go back here to my slide. It cannot be because when we study this image here, or this one over here, forgive me, this one, or these, or even these, we will understand with our knowledge of science and cosmology, we will understand why each camera will pick a different perspective, a different light there. Nonetheless, when we talk about subjective phenomena such as out-of-body experience and others, we need to find methods, we need to find ways for us to be able to examine the reality behind it so that we know this is a phenomenon that's new, it's not completely understood yet, so we need to develop more studies, or these other phenomena here is just mind effects, just the brain playing with us because there is a fact that happens, or this is a whatever, out-of-body experience or clairvoyance or some other perceptions. So my experience, the one that I told you that was a confirmed experience, happened when I was around 7 or 8 years old. You see here the image of São Paulo city. I am from Brazil. Excuse me for a moment, please. So, of course, we know a huge city. I am from a town that looked like this at the same period. Pretty much we knew the whole city. It was so funny because when we would have, let's say, somebody passed in the city, they would announce in the microphone of the church, so everyone would know somebody died in the city. So it was this small. And I was not familiar with anything related to São Paulo or how life worked, as for a matter of fact, because I have never been to a movie theater. We did not have a TV at home. But then there was a time in which an uncle of mine went for a surgery in São Paulo. I did not know he was ill. I did not know he went for surgery. All I know is that sometimes I would have experiences during the night in which I would see my body sleeping. Those experiences would make me think, was it possible I should be dreaming? I should be sleeping. I should not be awake. Because for me, there was no question whatsoever that I was awake, but my body was there. So that confused me. In one of these experiences, I ended up going to the hospital in São Paulo where my uncle was, which I didn't even know he was going to a doctor. I knew he was traveling to visit relatives, but I did not know anything else, not even the city. But then, when I went there to the hospital, I could see every detail of a hospital and how he was with breathing with the help of oxygen. He was in post-operatory condition. I could see that drain coming out from his abdomen. I knew later he had a bladder surgery. And that just stood in my mind for a decade or more. Until one day, I started connecting some of these experiences that I had, this phase of life when I would perceive not so nice entities around. Fortunately, it was only a 1 year period, but it was very intense. But I started associating those experiences with some other things that I have had as a child, like sensing chakras or hearing my name being called or somebody talking to me. There was nobody there. Those were not traumatic at all. And all of the out-of-body experiences that I had were not traumatic at all. But when I started putting together all of these, I said, there's got to be something else. Because for me, it has always been like inside of myself, the idea that the world could not be only this that we see, especially in our culture in Brazil. I would say, what the heck? So every Sunday we go to our mothers or grandmothers to eat a pasta. I am from an Italian family. So the city I was in or lived in as a child, Jacutinga, was built by Italians. And so the newspaper was written in Italian. It was so interesting. So I say, what is this? So we go here, we eat a beautiful pasta, and then we work, we come back. It's only that. There's got to be more. So I remember thinking that since I was a child, so in a way, those were innate ideas. But my experiences triggered my curiosity to study it. And that's when I started observing that we did not have a lot of study about it. And I started thinking how much more we needed to understand about these phenomena. So that is what prompted me to study all of this. And the idea that I had is this a natural phenomenon that I experienced? It cannot be fantasy, because I knew for a fact I could never have imagined, fantasized, extrapolated in my mind the events that I saw in that specific out-of-body experience. So if it could not, then how could I interpret all of these experiences and the situations that I have been through. So I thought that we needed to study more. And I went, oh, let me find everything that the world knows about it. Until I learned that we knew very little. Most of the things that would be discussed about the out-of-body experience was how dangerous it was, because people do not have information, and then they assume, oh, you can get lost. No, we can get lost in the physical world, not there, at least not in the way people think of it. And then all of the different interpretations that people would make without having a proper understanding of the phenomenon. So this was for me very impactful. And I would look for more and more information. And what I found, the more serious study that I found was from this gentleman, Robert Krukov. And as you can see, he was one of the pioneers. We also had before him Sylvan Muldoon. Some of you may be familiar with Sylvan Muldoon. He's a big classic. And he did studies on the out-of-body experience with Carrington, who was more a researcher. Muldoon was more of an OBer. But I love what they have written because it's not tainted. It's not tainted by what somebody heard from somebody else and what is popular, what's politically correct, what you can say, what you cannot say. I love their text. But one needs to understand how out-of-body experience works to be able to infer what is it that they are talking about and what phenomenon is there. And then I'm not here at all hoping to mention all of the researchers. I'm just pinpointing how few of them we have, but we have quite a number of them, very good ones. But just to cite a few, we had Carlos Ozes, Charles Tart, we had Gently Mitchell and Celia Green and others that have studied about the out-of-body experience. They came to interesting conclusions, but more their goals, let me put it this way, was more improving the out-of-body experience exists. And according to my experience after 33, 35 years researching and lecturing about this, I think, those who are open to see the evidences, they may at least think, it's possible some people talk about this. Others may say, yes, I have experienced it. Never want to have it again. Not because it was bad, but just because they want to be on the cautious side, but many have this type of thinking. But others, they may just think, no, this is impossible. It's just a dream, it's a fantasy, it's just for crazy people. And I think that these studies have created little impact, let me say it this way, little impact in our society in general to prove out-of-body experience exists. Not Krukov. Krukov was not trying to prove it, but the other ones, yes, they did experiments hoping to find confirmation. But they did little impact in science. They did little impact in society. Their work is of a great value. And I myself have conducted some research, hoping to find like that eureka moment in which you can prove this exists. Some were more like laboratory experiences that I did, or in laboratorial condition, more controlled condition. The aim was never to prove the out-of-body experience, but it would be great if we could have a result that would bring that amazing proof. But no proof is good enough if those who are analyzing the proof do not understand the phenomenon they are studying. Then it's not possible. It's not possible. And that's what I see happens. There are many people who have, let's say, good, interesting out-of-body experiences, and many people hoping to study the out-of-body experience, but very few who have both a researcher and an experimenter at the same time. We need this bridge. We need this equivalence in knowledge, or at least to get closer to it, so that we come to more impactful, more valuable conclusions, something that brings some steps forward, some progress in understanding the phenomenon. But the research that I did was more aimed at understanding how we bring the information of what we have experienced, not with the physical brain. So our consciousness is somewhere else. I would not even say our consciousness. We, as consciousness, we manifest somewhere else, independently of the brain, which challenges one of the big dogmas or frameworks of a large portion of our society, or sorry, scientific community, that considers that consciousness and the sense of being, personality, derives from the brain and purely genetical or physical influences. But many scientists from many different areas nowadays are hoping to find ways to see how consciousness works, because we have many studies that points to the fact that consciousness is not local and it's not an epiphenomenon of the brain. It is the agent per se. But let's say that in the out-of-body experience, the consciousness itself is in a point of view or experiencing a reality that is not being observed with the brain. When we bring that information, how do we transfer the information from our non-physical bodies, whatever you call it, astral body, subtle body, there are different names, but from our non-physical body to the physical brain? And there is loads of observations that point to us that there is when a lot of confusion happens, because our brain is filled with memories of this life, but even more importantly, with conditionings related to our life here in the physical world, with cultural influences, with limitations of our knowledge, with our own fears, limitations of the knowledge of science in general, but no, our own personal knowledge as well. So how can we interpret an information that was experienced without the physical brain and bring it without altering the information if we do not have the proper framework to absorb it, to examine it? And I see that lots of confusion happen at this moment. If we take the case, for example, of near-death experiences, so many individuals who experience the near-death, they will interpret, and that is known all over the world, they will interpret the experience according to their belief system, usually under the frame of a religious belief system. And then we think, okay, but how do we progress from that? So some of these research were experiments, hoping to compare what people would, or how people would describe what they have seen outside the body with something that was actually there. I'm not going to go into details, so I don't take the time here to discuss this. But this was the purpose. And there were some conclusions of, like, for example, colors and this overall framework of what we see, our vision is very impactful. Why is it? Because we are very visual beings, we human beings, right? We are very visual. Sometimes we look at something and we judge by the looks, and that is so natural. But not all of us are like this. And when we are outside the body, our senses work in a different way. And then how do we make sense of what we experience out there if the laws of physics are not necessarily the same? Sometimes in some dimensions closer to ours here, it is a bit closer, but never the same. But in some other levels of the non-physical reality, the spirit world that we may end up projected, can be very different from what we expect based on our knowledge here. So that challenged our knowledge, that challenged our roots, that challenged our beliefs. And only someone who managed to have a recollection that came very clear will end up pondering completely about the phenomena, as was my case, especially with the experience there with the hospital where I saw my uncle, because the previous experience I had before of seeing my body, I just took them as nothing. I never even thought of them. Were I not known at that time that I had seen something that was actually happening at that very time, it was not premonition, it was not capturing somebody's thoughts via intuition. No, it was the actual phenomenon. So had I not been able to pick that, I would not be interested or open to study the phenomenon the same way. So I think here, one of the situations that we see is that we need to understand more. We have surveys, and we also have done surveys at the International Academy of Consciousness. And when we have a program that is existing for long, it's called Consciousness Development Program, which I am old enough to say I taught in person in like 17, 18 different countries. At the time, we had to travel to teach. Nowadays, we can do it online. That's wonderful. But only on that program, we would hear so many cases, understand so much about the out-of-body experience. And that was the key. So we did some surveys there. We did some online surveys that were open to the public, but we need to understand more of this phenomenon. Because you see, if we think of the mechanism of the out-of-body experience, if I may jump to this, yes, Judy, may I go ahead, right? Okay, excuse me again, please. So this image here, oh, sorry, my mobile here making noises, forgive me. This image here, it's an image that was created by the IAC for pedagogical purposes. Fortunately, it's all over the internet, but it's ours. I was one of those who created this, sitting beside an artist. But it was created to put up representation, a visual representation of something that we may see when we are outside the body, or we may see on others who are sleeping close to us. But of course, we are not going to see exactly like this, but it resembles. We cannot put here how we would see it because it's not possible to completely make it visual. At least was not at the time with our technology there. But here, what we see is that there are some sort of energetic links or an energy field that binds the physical body to the non-physical body. And this binding field, we like calling it at the IAC an energetic interface because it works as an interface. This is present here with us the whole time. Now, this brings to us some very specific conclusions. One of the conclusions is that if this energy of our energy field and chakras and aura, it's all different aspects of the same energy. Or the silver cord, it's the same energy, same field, but sometimes we are only sensing one area, one vortex, or we call it a chakra. We are outside the body, so we see all the links, or we are further, it forms only one link, the silver cord. But the fact is, this energy here, it is the absolute key for us to understand the out-of-body experience, because the looser they are, the less rigid, less stagnant, the easier to disconnect from the body. And then we'll explain why some people will have out-of-body experience more easily than others. Sometimes spontaneously, but even for those who practice techniques and they want to produce their out-of-body experiences, and I have loads of experience helping people, we see that there are differences. It's not just a matter of, I've got a technique that is good and I will succeed. Perhaps you do it the first time, but there are many variables involved. And this looseness of the energy is key. But sometimes there are individuals who have this energy with a certain characteristics. And again, there's so much study and knowledge behind it that it's hard to talk about. I have here behind me my book. That's the Portuguese version. Unfortunately, I do not have the English version here with me. But it's 500 pages of research, evidences, discussion only about our energy field and how it works. Because when somebody's sensitive and, for example, can sense a spirit giving a message, or can sense the grandmother close by, and of course she passed away, that's why I said the grandmother, just to try and make sure and imply it is at this point or at that point, at the non-physical world in between lives. So somebody can sense it and maybe not even see, but they know it's the great-grandmother. Other people, they will have a premonition, like feel something is going to happen, or get close to someone and have an instant feeling that that person is trustworthy or not. So why is it, what is the difference? What is the means that allows us to have all of these phenomena? And most importantly, how this energy affects us, other people, environments, because it seems, and that's what we observe when we are outside the body, that there is this ocean of energy that is composed of all of our energy. I cannot even say this way, it's not precise, but just to make this statement here, not hoping to have a scientific precision. But this field that is interacting, interconnecting all of us is what makes us know when somebody is thinking of us at a distance. Have you ever done that? Or you all of a sudden know somebody needs me, or there is something going on with someone, or even something good. You have an intuition, do this now, it's going to work. And then you do and you say, oh, you know, something came to me and told me that, and I followed. Or a story that I know, and I know so many, but like a relative who is not so much into studying all of these, but when I hear what he says, I say, he's quite sensitive. We do not need to know names or to study, to be sensitive to this reality. We do not know what we have experienced, and perhaps our brain is not remembering it, but it is inside of us. And this information will make a lot of sense to some people because it is inside of them. But this relative of mine, I was saying, it's my nephew, he always would drive on the road coming back from work. And of course, on the road in Brazil, in America, not in UK, but here, we drive on the right side because it was a road, how do you say that, has double direction. And then one day, for no reason whatsoever, he just felt go on the wrong side. And he did not question that. It was almost like he thought and he went to the other side. The road was empty. I mean, there was nobody. So of course he wouldn't do it because there was like a car coming against him. But the moment he did that, came a car fleeing from the police out of nowhere. Had he been in the right lane, he would have been hit. How do we explain something like this? And we all have these stories. What do we do with these stories? We put in a package, unexplainable, just coincidence. It happens. It's a message of God. Okay, it can be all of that. But perhaps there is something operating there that gives us a sense that we are not trained to understand and to use, but we are affected by it and we can affect others. Some people just by loving somebody, they can heal a person. And there are so many cases and studies of healing. And again, I'm not going to be discoursing about that here, but when we think of healing and we think of this energy and how energy interacts and what we see outside the body, and I'll tell you guys some of the things that we see. It's amazing how interconnected we are with this non-physical reality and non-physical people, spirits. And in the same way, with physical people who may be even further from us, but then we are super, of course, into our own energy and the information that is here in our energy field, even in an unconscious level, things that we don't remember. Or perhaps, if you are open to the idea, things that took place in previous lives. There are many very interesting studies about previous lives and showing evidences of it. But my point here is that when we study the out-of-body experience, and we see something like this, and we understand that the mechanism of the out-of-body experience is dependent on this energetic interface, as we like to say, then we will start seeing what is the key mechanism behind other phenomena, and we will have a better basis to understand what we experience, to understand why we or you sometimes feel differently in a certain environment than in another, or why you may feel sick just when you pick a book in a library and that book brought something to you that you didn't expect, or you feel a huge energy shower and something very nice because you picked a book, of course, different books in this case. But we can understand loads of what we experience based on this energy, and the out-of-body experience can bring many evidences. One of the phenomena that we understand with the out-of-body experience and studying energy resonance and this energy field is the vibrational state. And the vibrational state is just a deep, intense sensation of vibrations inside of our bodies, as if all of our cells were shaking in a frenzy. But that is a phenomenon. That is not just like you can leave the body, you can have this phenomenon. But many times this comes associated with the out-of-body experience. So it's one of the sensations that people report. Modun reported many times. For him, that was very common. For others, not so common. And then just a curiosity. Have you ever had one of these deep, intense vibrations that comes all of a sudden? It's pleasant, but it can be so different sensation and so strong that may even spook us a little bit if we don't know what it is. So if this is going to be on YouTube, Judy, I love to hear people's comments. And this vibrational state and these energies that we see here is composed of our own energy field, and we can learn to master this. Why would we want to master these energies? Goodness, because if that is interacting with everything else, if we have more knowledge and stability with this energy, wouldn't we be more stable in all senses? Less impact of negative energies, more stable health. We are going to die one day. I'm not saying we are not going to, and I'm not saying it's going to heal us from everything. No, but solid evidence, solid research that we have been done, independent research, shows that we can control this energy and we can be more knowledgeable of what sort of information, energetic information is around and how it affects us. There is one technique that I have developed, or better saying, it's an ancient technique since Buddha, but people practice, each of them in a different way. I did more than 15 years of research, serious research, to see in which way that technique was beneficial, how that worked, why people would have more out-of-body experience when they would use that technique. Because that was a technique that even Robert Monroe proposed to use to try and leave the body. So it is like unconsciously people use it in many different areas. So why is it? So I started studying, and I ended up doing a very long study, perhaps more technical than most people would like. I completely recognize, but that's how I am. I like understanding things, and At least I hoped to have brought information enough to help others devise serious techniques with energy and to leave the body. Because just making a parenthesis, a quick one, and I go back to this method, just a parenthesis. People just create any technique. Oh, use this chakra, open here, do there. Most of the cases, it's, innocuous, okay. Some people will sense, some people will benefit, but there are many cases in which people are sensitive. They have energies not so balanced around or connected to them for reasons that may be related to them or not. And they may end up getting more open to those energy because of practicing techniques that were not well devised. It's just, do this. Oh, I heard that. Oh, I practice was nice. So then you do. But it's like, I have this pill here that helped me a lot. You take it. You need a doctor to see if that is appropriate to you. And that's what I like doing with the energy techniques and the out-of-body experience techniques. I think we need to understand how they work, what sort of effects they have, and if there are any possible side effects, how we handle it, because we have to, right? So then, with this studying, I brought a technique that is called Velo, V-E-L-O, or a method to do this technique. The technique is very simple. I will mention it here. It's just move the energy to the top of your head, and from the top of your head to the sole of your feet, the energy moves only inside your body. So it goes longitudinally. That's it. We want to make as much energy to pass through the root of all of our chakras in as short period of time as possible. So straight line is the shortest, right, between 2 points. And you focus and you move the energy inside yourself. There are loads of results. If you want to hear about this, you look in my channel, and may say this, right, Judy, for them to look at the, what is Velo, V-E-L-O. It means voluntary, energetic, longitudinal oscillation. That's the full name of the technique, but I use it as an acronym, V-E-L-O. You go there, you know details, you learn how to do it. It's very, very interesting, the results, because that is a very safe, risk-free technique. That's what I love about it. But then with this technique, we can start melting down energy blocks and having more experiences, but not only more in quantity, but healthier ones. And if there is something that is not right around, I do not know if you appreciate thinking of this, but let's say there is some energy in the astral world around of us. And there's something there that is not totally adjusted to ourselves, to you, to your reality, your house. Isn't it better to know about it and then you can do something about it than not even knowing? So that is the idea. So this technique makes you more perceptive, but at the same time makes you stronger. So we grow hand in hand. And that is a very, very good. There are evidences even of physical impact, but that's not what the technique was created for. It was created to help us balance our energy and our awareness, multidimensional awareness. We can sense the physical world and we can sense the non-physical world. We can understand this moment here, but we can also, we should be able to, let me put it this way, to understand the energetic reality, what's happening in our chakras, how that influence us. In a way that is not fantasy. We cannot let fantasy just mix with it. Otherwise, it's a waste. So we need to learn how to distinguish. But there are true events, true phenomena. So let's learn how to distinguish. Let's learn how it works for each of us. Your case, or your experiences, or your sensitivity is different than mine, is different than Judy's. But that's it. We can learn about it. So the vibrational state is one phenomenon that can be produced with the Velo technique, but many times happens spontaneously. All of the other phenomena that involve the non-physical reality or experience or telepathy, all of those there is some aspect in which these subtle energies are, in a way, making them possible. And that's a long analysis, but I wanted to bring this here. And many of the sensations of the disconnection from the body, and I have a list of 60 plus or 70 something that we have done research. I say myself and Wagner Allegretti, who is my partner in work, in life, and we have done many research together. But some of the interesting results we got is that sleep paralysis is the most common phenomenon for people who experience out-of-body experiences. And then you tell me, have you ever had a sleep paralysis? How was it? And other sensations like you are rocking, swaying, you are falling, you are jerking awake, you are hearing like people talking close to you, you are not asleep yet, but you know it's going on, it's there. So have you ever had it? I think we need to have, at this point here, true scientific spirit to endeavor to observe our own experiences and separate what is just a fantasy, what is just our brain producing some perhaps analysis or interpretation that is not there, and what is, does it make sense to you? Because wouldn't the out-of-body experience, the possibility of seeing life from a different perspective, perhaps even greater than we would have when we are in between lives, because we can go to different dimensions in between lives. It's not as exact like this, but I'll leave it there. But wouldn't it be great if we could understand this moment under that vision? And then you may ask me, but Nanci, does that mean we will know everything? It solves our problem? Absolutely not, because we have our limitations in how much or how far we see, how much we can remember. What are the information that has been repeated enough for us to gather evidence, or to gather a pattern about the phenomenon? And that scientist that I mentioned to you, Robert Krukl, one of the things that I like very much about his work is that he was not somebody who had out-of-body experience, but he was one of the very, very rare ones that was open enough to examine cases and start cross-checking. It's thousands of cases. What is in common? What is in common? And these people do not know each other. They come from different backgrounds, different roots, and what's in common. And he is one of the persons that influenced the most our understanding of out-of-body experience, how things happen outside the body, what's the situation of people who are in between lives. He didn't come to the full conclusion, but he picked what was in common among those thousands of cases that he studied by interviewing people. So he was very brave, very open-minded. And that's why I point here, that is a true scientific spirit, right? And we could do more studies and seeing out-of-body experience as a tool, not necessarily as an end only. And I think we are in our time, right, Judy? I'm going to move quickly here forward, just to mention a few things that I wanted to say, like some of the personal conclusions that we end up having when we have lucid out-of-body experience. Lucid, I mean one that is unquestionable to you. We are not the body, and that changed everything. Does not change some aspects of our personality, and that's perhaps what we are here to learn. Life is demanding, life is challenging, relationships, they are super challenging. And it is something that we keep learning more and more. But what is behind all of this? If we are all consciousness, what is behind? If this life is just a moment, why is it? And of course, I have lots of theories and things that I observed. But the point is, the conclusion that we are not the body changed everything. And then we feel like, well, there's got to be a point to this life. And then we start realizing that we may have something to do here, that we are all interconnected, that aspect of the energy that I mentioned to you before. And this is some of the conclusion that many people who had near-death experience come to. But that's one experience that they had to almost die to have it. You can have it by yourself, on your own, based on your own skills, without imagination, using different aspects of your energetic sensations, your perceptions, and this is natural. We all, it seems, leave the body every night when we reach certain specific point of relaxation. As much as somebody who is in anesthesia, they do leave the body because the relaxation is so much that those and that energetic interface, the energetic links start loosening up. The big question is, do they remain lucid or they are outside the body like in a coma, not experiencing anything? For all practical purposes, being outside the body and not experiencing anything because we are completely unconscious is the same as not being outside the body. And that is the thing. The majority of the population have never been lucid outside the body. But having said that, research points out to like 2% of the population having had absolutely lucid conscious out-of-body experience. I need to update the surveys and study the data. Some of the data that we have not yet completely analyzed at the IAC. But my feeling is that it's bigger than that. And nowadays people talk more about this. So this, having more knowledge of this would bring deep social implications, but deep scientific implications, only to understand our health, what makes us happy. Perhaps we could have more insights, we could bring to the table more aspects that are related to our energetic balance, sometimes to feelings that we have that they cannot be explained based on the current context of our life, on what's going on at that moment. And I don't know how your experiences are, but many people have sometimes these, I would say, emotions or feelings or thoughts that they feel it's not exactly related to them or consistent with them, but still they have it. So we would have lots of impact knowing of this, and even impact in science. Now I want to invite you to download my book. I should have given you the link so people go directly. Judy, I'll send it to you later, but I only thought at the last minute, if you're interested in the out-of-body experience, you can go and download the book. So that is something that you may be interested in. And I guess that was my last slide. I see Judy launched a poll there, so I will be quiet for this moment. You mute my phone as appropriate there, Judy.
No, you don't have to. I was just curious. I was going to ask, I've never done a poll before, so I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but I was just curious, people listening, if people, because, you know, you talked about 2%, and I was thinking, like you, I think it's much higher. And fully aware that the people listening are a self-selecting population who are more open to this kind of thing. But I think it's quite a few.
Yes, you see, we have there some answers. Yes, but that is quite interesting. Perhaps we have some questions as well, Judy.
Yeah, so if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask a question directly, you may, and I'll unmute you. let me see what Donna Lee said. Donna found myself flying ultra-dimensionally as a child many times. This sensation of flying, I know that's very common in dreams. Is that I assume that's more than just dream? That's probably a real out-of-body experience.
Yes, usually, let me stop sharing my screen so I can see you all better. Usually, especially when it's a child, but we don't normally would dream of flying because we dream of stimulus and information that we have stored in our brain, not only that we have experienced that moment, but throughout our lives. And we don't fly. So of course, somebody can dream of flying. I'm not going to say all of them are out of body experience, but when we hear the report, when people experience which phase of their lives, what was the experience or the dream that came right before or right after, we see that the majority is out of body experience. You know what would happen to me when I was around, I think 12, 13, 14, around this age? I would sometimes be out of my body, but just acting as if I were in the physical world, not completely conscious. And then I wanted to move, but I did not manage to control the astral body as I would control the physical body. It was different body, different rules. The sense of gravity was different. The street that I would see, and usually I had those in close to the place I used to live at that time. I'm in the same street. So I would try and move and I couldn't. So I would swim. So for me, what was net was swimming the air. I do not know if any of you ever had this experience. Some people I know, Judy, that they jump. Like they learned when they are into that strange dream that it's so vivid and they are seeing themselves in a place they know and they cannot move in the same way that they would sense here. So they jump, or as in me, they would fly. Sorry, I mean swim. And some find it more easy to fly. Some fly very close to the what would be the equivalent of the floor out there. But yes, usually they are interconnected. To answer short, right? I end up adding comments here.
So Jean wants to know, what is your personal theory about why we're here? That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. But I think from experiences of mine, situations that I saw of people who were in between lives, my logics, of course, because I think we have to resort to some model that fits. I think we are here to develop skills that they are not possible to develop when we are in between lives. Most people would assume that when they are without the physical bodies, so they have passed away, and if they are in a good condition, right, after dying, because not everyone is, but most people would assume, yes, I continue being who I am, and I'll be okay in a dimension that is nice. Others, they fear, I'm going to be in a dimension that is not good. I go to hell, right? So these things people put in our mind, heaven and hell, it's not like this, it doesn't work in this way, but there are different types or layers or levels of dimension with different type of communities. When we are in between lives, we end up being more in resonance due to our knowledge, our evolution, our wisdom, our inner values. And this is to put words that they do not do justice to the greatness of the topic. But all of these are reflected in our energy. And then people, when they are in between lives, and all of you are there, perhaps this will explain some of your experience, or you would love to go out of the body and research that. But when we are in an environment, we see individuals that are more or less of the same, how would I say? They are not the same, of course, but they have similar beliefs, similar ways of experiencing life. So we see pockets of individuals that they complement each other in a way that they are very similar and they can be with each other. When we are here in this world, we experience all sorts of things. We have people that are very nice to us today, and tomorrow they kick us, they betray us. We can be in one morning, and I believe all of you will understand and relate to this. In one morning, we feel we are shining inside. We don't even know why. But on another morning, oh, it's dull and heavy. And what changed? What happened? And all of these different experiences that we can have here and we cannot have out there. We can have if we are projected in an out-of-body experience, but not if we passed and we are more permanent condition in that non-physical level. So all of these variety of experiences and challenges and pains and things that we did hoping it was the right thing, and then we learn by mistake, all of this is a process that helps us increase self-knowledge, helps us see ourselves, helps us learn to master different levels of energy. Physical body is energy, our chakras and the energy field is another level, and then astral body is another one. But of course, this is not different than what so many others say. Even in religion, you came here to be a better person. And then you resort to another philosophy, you are here to learn about yourself. But it seems that's what makes sense. And perhaps just the definition puts this in a level that it's so equal to so many, but how it is applied in life, I think that varies how we use this knowledge. But I emphasize, and I have already said here, life has its challenge. And I am not totally evolved, and none of you are. So we have our challenge. But if we understand the mechanisms, if we find tools to make it a bit easier, if we learn tools and strategies that can make our energy more settled, that can cleanse a bit of the energy around the bus, reduce sometimes influence of some entities that may be just gravitating around, that is a huge help. And there's where I stand, because all of this technique has helped me a lot. So I pass forward.
I love that. I've heard from many spiritual traditions, that people, the enlightened, or I'll say enlightened beings have said, what a privilege it is to be in a body, because of what we can do here when we're not in a body. But but it is very dense, like you said.
It is very
it's
dense.
very challenging.
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about, and this is probably two separate questions. In the very beginning, you mentioned when you had a time when there were entities around you that were not pleasant. So I wanted to ask you about that and how that resolved. And then Odair is asking, what can you say about this wave of extraterrestrials that we see these days in the astral projection view?
Okay, that's both very interesting questions. So going to the first one first. Can you repeat the first one, please, Julie?
So the question was just about your experience of
oh yes,
entities,
the entities and how that resolved. Yes.
Intrusive or not?
Yes, intrusive, and actually what I learned later, that is very common type of entity. They get very close to children. I was around 12 at that time. They get close to children because it's easier to bully children, but easier not because I'm going to put words here. I hope I'm using the right English expression. Not because children are more bullyable. Probably this word doesn't exist, but you guys understand what I mean. No, just because they are more sensitive. So children, when they are in silence, their energies are more loose, and then they end up sensing the spirit world more than an adult would sense in normal conditions. The same person, the person is 30, 35, and that same person was 8, 7, 4, 12, 13. The level of sensitivity and perception is very different. So I learned later, but through studies, through the research I'm doing with children who have had experience, and I have interviewed several children and several very interesting adults. And what I have learned is that many of these entities who get close, they're just having fun. Why? Because when we are silent, and that applies to adults as well, when we are silent and in the dark, one of the most important senses we have, the most prevalent, that is vision, is not there. So we kind of open our senses to other realities. And once you feel a little bit of some energy that is different, you pay attention to it, you reinforce the energetic connection. And if there is an entity there, the more you observe the entity, the more the entity knows there is this energetic connection, but it's unavoidable, right? You cannot say, I'm not sensing what I'm sensing. No, if you are sensing, you have to learn how to disconnect and what to do. You cannot pretend not to know what you know. And then those consciousness start getting closer, not closer in distance, not at all. Nobody should worry about that, but start getting closer in terms of their energetic connection. And then we sense more and more. At that time, I remember somebody, I think it was an uncle. My mother was very sensitive. Actually, in my family, I have two sisters who are instructors of the International Academy of Consciousness, as I am. The current president of the IAC is a sister of mine. So you see that we were kind of sensitive. And I think my mother spoke with somebody, an uncle that used to live far away. And he came with someone from this spiritist religion. We have a lot in Brazil. And he came supposedly to try and remove some spirits that were in the house. Did it improve my condition? It did. It reduced the number of spirits that I would feel close by, and that type of nightmare that I would have, that they were never nightmares, they were real experiences. And that those people would wake me up in the middle of the night with a noise or calling my name, or I would feel them touch me. That reduced a lot, did not go away, because the house was in an environment, I mean, the neighborhood was heavy. And I to this date, I don't understand why. What is there in the spirit level that causes that type of energy to be around? But it made it much better. The great improvement, the mega difference for me was when I learned in different ways, but in much simpler ways, this technique now that I write about and that I research, that is the Velo technique. Because there was not so much details on how to do it. So I would, by myself, sensing, and I was sensitive, I did not know I was. To me, all of that was, I don't know, I didn't think what those experiences were. All I know is that I was experiencing that. So when I learned that technique and I started doing it, and concentrating and trying to really move energy, I started observing in which ways that technique that I now call Velo would be more effective. Judy, it was so amazing. Judy and all of you who are there with me, it was so amazing that in few weeks, and when I learned it, I was 25. I didn't have those entities around until 25, but after that period there, that I was around 12 and 13, when the heavy period happened, I became very sensitive and very afraid in a way. So I would sleep. Many times I would turn the lights on because I would sense something. I wanted noise. I wanted the lights on so that I would not focus my attention on what I was sensing was the way for me to sleep. And I know many people still have that at their adult age, as I had. I was 25. I think that is, old enough to not to need to sleep with the lights on. But I didn't have that before that period. But then what happened is that I started doing Velo, and like in 3-4 weeks that started improving, 5-6 weeks, I could enter in an environment in completely darkness, an environment that I did not know. My strength, energetic strength, was completely different. And the interesting thing is that I did not lose the perception of what was around. What happened is that those energy and entities would not be able to enter my mind, hit me with their energies of bullying because they're having fun. Fortunately, that's all they wanted, to have fun. But they would not be able to hit me deeply. So that's what I managed to do with Velo. And that's why I thought it was so important to develop a proper way to do the technique. Having said that, I'd like just to compliment for those who are watching us that sometimes there are children who have this period of greater sensitivity, but they sometimes have entities close by that gives them like sexual thoughts. And then it's so confusing. You can imagine. And many times the child will think there's something wrong, never tells anybody. Sometimes that persists until later in life. That's just a different type of bullying. I fortunately never had that. It was more of the guys, making me afraid and making fun. But that reduced with this uncle of mine who went there with somebody to work with energy in the house. But went away indefinite when I started to learn to move and control my energy. That's why I'm so grateful to the technique and some of the teachings that we give in the consciousness development program. It's exactly to build this strength. And then I dedicate so much to that, Julie. So many years of my life. But I know we end up touching people's life deeply with this, because when someone is sensitive to the non-physical reality around, it can be very complex to deal with life, world, going places, workplace. It's complicated.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a framework, for how to
interpret.
what to put this.
Absolutely. Yes,
And so
yes.
speaking of that, then about extraterrestrials.
Oh, yes. Oh, there is questions. Yes, that's an interesting question, because look, if I say extraterrestrials doesn't exist, that is, or don't exist, that is stupid. Look at the size of the universe. Of course, there are. When we are outside the body, we can go and visit other planets. It's much harder to remember because it's so different from the framework that we have in our minds, but it's possible. So therefore, there's got to be possible the other way around, and we are not alone. And I do think that even some of these sightings people have with extraterrestrial, they were really there. And I am amazed that they don't happen more frequently. However, having said that, and being completely open to this idea, I must emphasize that nowadays there is too much of an exploitation of this idea, making people think non-stop of extraterrestrial, therefore stimulating that they, or encouraging that they have out-of-body experience, and whatever they see, they interpret as a spaceship, they interpret as an extraterrestrial. And let's remember that lots of what we remember from the out-of-body experience ends up conflicting with the information we have in our brain. So if somebody's reading and studying about that and thinking all the time, eventually they will have experiences that when they recall, they will immediately connect with extraterrestrials. So again, these experiences are possible, but the number of experiences that people describe nowadays, no, it doesn't make any sense. And then people say, oh, it's because extraterrestrials, they are more present at the moment. Guys, 1,000 years is nothing to the scale of the reality we are talking about here. We are talking about civilizations in other planets and their own evolution. So it's not in the last 10 years or 5. Some people come to with theories that they say, how did they come to that conclusion? Oh, it's because I saw one extraterrestrial. You say you saw, but let's see, the logics of it. So I think there's a lot of exploitation. I think there's a lot of people, benefiting in terms of sending ideas that either make people feel that they are very special for connecting with an extraterrestrial, or just aiming for that, or fearing that, or with conspiracy theories. And our brain, human brain, unfortunately, is shaped to try and find patterns where not necessarily there is one. That's why we have to be so careful when researching the out-of-body experience. We have to be so careful when researching about any of these ideas of the spirit world, and when researching about extraterrestrials. And another comment that I want to make is that when we talk about extraterrestrial, a big question here would be, are we talking about non-physical extraterrestrial that we sense as if they were spirits? Are we talking about something that is spiritual because we are sensing, for example, extraterrestrials that are outside of their bodies, projected? As I say, in the same way we can have an astral projection and go to another planet, perhaps some are here, perhaps some are temporarily here. Are we talking about extraterrestrials who are now in this world, but we don't see them because they are in a different frequency? Are we talking about extraterrestrials that they can manifest in the physical world? So it depends on the angle we see that, for us to consider if we are seeing this as in a spiritual matter or just as something that needs to be uncovered, and it absolutely does, of course. And I think it's just to start with logical that there would be some connection with beings from other worlds. How? Not necessarily I have an answer, but inside the body, outside the body. Some of them may be reaching us through different ways, different ships. But the thing is, to what extent we can separate, again, the conspiracy theory of something being hidden to what is really hidden, to what's really known. And I think we are in a very fortunate phase in which people are looking for facts and evidences, but as you know, seeing an image or a figure on the clouds, sometimes we end up filling the gaps there. Do not know if I answered, Judy. I do not have a visual connection with you. Perhaps I lost the connection. Perhaps I'm still there. I see the count here, the time counting. Are you there, Judy? Let me see here in the chat if I have any message from you. Let me ask. Ah, okay, still connected. Wonderful. Hi, Jean. Nice to see you here. Wonderful. Okay, so I think I only lost the visual connection with Judy. Judy's gone, but we are here. Okay, so, but I guess it's up to me then to finalize our talk, right? And I guess I have to do it. It's so wonderful. Let me see some of your names now that I am here seeing the chat. It would be wonderful to get to know you. And I hope to see you again. I am going to be in California in May. So I'm planning, if possible, to go and visit FNDR in person. So those of you who are in California, it will be great to be there, to see you in person. I'm going to be there for some private sessions as well. And if not, maybe in the future here on another talk, you tell me what you would like, or you visit my channel. But I guess that's it. I do not know how to conclude here. I have 2 new messages. Thank you. So I'm going to say a big thank you to all of you and close then the meeting. Okay? Goodbye. It was a great pleasure to be here. Hope we can repeat it soon. Goodbye, guys. Ciao, ciao.